Hello my friends, I'm Professor Hans von Puppet here today for Modern Gaming Roundup. Are you tired of retro gaming? I know I am. I can't tell you how tired I am of listening to other podcasts prattle on about Pac-Man or Space Invaders. Well, my good friends at Modern Gaming Roundup have come up with a brand spanking new podcast. Go to www.moderngamingroundup.com to see how they can take care of all your modern gaming needs.
The old dinosaur himself, Simon Butler here, talking about Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. Sadly, I can't join in the group discussion on this title. Life has gotten in the way, so I'm doing a pre-recorded section that Ben and Mark can then take to task or agree with as they see fit. Bloodstained, it ticked a lot of boxes for me. People know that I'm a big sort of Metroidvania fan, so why shouldn't I like a Castlevania clone? And I'm not saying I don't like it. It's one of those things, somebody asks you if you want a sandwich and you get it and you have this wonderful idea of what this sandwich is going to be, and it's just a sandwich. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is just a Castlevania clone. It's good, it's very good. What it does well. It doesn't fail to do anything. I suppose its only failing is it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. Reading about it and seeing it was developed in 6 months, that's pretty damn impressive. Pretty damn impressive indeed. 6 months for a title like this. There's a lot going on in there. There's 4 characters to play, different weapons, mix and match. You can sort of juggle your gameplay, keeping your characters alive rather than just sticking with one and watching him die, and then you can sort of fiddle around picking up life hearts and magic power-ups. It is really, really good, but like I say, it's very dry. Inti Creates, the developers, these are the guys behind Mighty No. 9, which, promised so much and delivered so very, very little. It doesn't fail up to that kind of standard, but it does. It's just there. It's just a clone. It doesn't bring anything new. It doesn't bring anything of its own, really. Not sufficiently to get overly excited about. I know that a lot of Castlevania fans do like it. It can be a challenge to play, depending on whether you play it on normal or easy, but it is incredibly short. People have praised it for options and game modes, but there's just not enough really to say it's its own creature. It is a tribute. It's a passionate tribute, a little bit too much so at times. You look at it and you just think, oh, how the hell did I miss this? Has this been out for like 25 years? Okay, so it's got sort of different paths, etc., but it's just too much of a clone. Yes, they wanted to pay homage to the original, but it's just outright copying. They've literally sort of said, well, what do we need? We need the character to, sort of walk this way, because it did that in the original. Yeah, okay, so we'll do that. We'll make it look like an NES, but not really like an NES. I think Shovel Knight succeeded infinitely better than this in doing that. It has borrowed concepts, but it does feel familiar, but it does feel new, but not new enough. It's a well-crafted product. There's no denying that. It's just, I don't know, it's like a meal with just a couple of ingredients missing. You don't know what they are. You just think, well, yeah, it was nice. It was filling, but not totally satisfying. It's not the hardest game in the world. And this is me talking, and I'm notoriously shit at games. So I got to the end bad person, being PC, and I got my ass handed to me, but it was a joy to play. I mean, it really was, mainly because I was making such progress. So maybe that's another failing, that Simon Butler got so far in a game so quickly. I only played it for on and off, a couple of hours over a couple of days, and got to the end of the game. That was on easy. I can't stand the Castlevania knockback every time you get hit. It dilutes the experience for me. It sort of really rattles my cage, getting knocked back, falling off platforms, falling down holes. But it ticks a lot of the Castlevania boxes. It's well put together. The development time is impressive, but maybe the development time underlines some of its shortcomings. So that's my take on Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. I look forward to hearing what Mark and Ben say about it, and I do recommend it to Castlevania fans. So if you haven't got it, go and get it, and maybe you'll disagree bitterly with my indictment of this very, very polished title. Thank you very much.
Alright, today we're talking about Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. This is a game from 2018. So a little bit newer, but it is a retro style game. This is sort of a Kickstarter complement for the other Bloodstained game, Ritual of the Night, that is coming out this month. 505 started Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. It didn't come out as soon as they wanted it to. It was delayed again, kind of like a lot of Kickstarters. So to sort of appease fans, this came out of nowhere. They made Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, gave it free to all the Kickstarter backers, which was a nice little surprise. I backed the original game on Kickstarter, so I got this as sort of like a nice little bonus. Wasn't expecting it, as were most of us that backed it. I think with Kickstarters, you kind of just, it comes with the territory. A lot of times these things end up in development hell or whatever happens, so they get delayed. You know, buyer beware when you back Kickstarters. You gotta kind of take the good with the bad and see where things go. That said, this is sort of a NES-style Metroidvania platformer game. We were originally going to record with Simon, but you just heard his bit, so we're going to kind of comment a little bit on what he said. What are your initial thoughts on this game?
I not backed the Ritual of the Night Kickstarter because it was at a time where I'd kind of had enough of gaming Kickstarters, and it looked like it was going to blow through its goals. So I kind of felt like I can sit back and just watch this, and it's going to get made, and then if it's good when it comes out, I'll buy it then, sort of thing. So I wasn't aware of this game as a stretch goal, and it kind of I think it was released as a bit of a surprise that it was ready and out and in people's hands so fast when it came out. So I'd seen the coverage, and I've always been a big fan of the original sort of style Castlevania games, but especially Castlevania 3. And seeing this, it just looked like very much more Castlevania 3. And sort of Simon says, you know, one of his complaints is that it doesn't really build on the formula particularly or do anything, but because Castlevania's moved on more of the Metroidvania style, the more of the adventuring rather than the pure action, I think it is actually quite nice for fans of that style of Castlevania just to get more Castlevania. I saw it and I was just like, yeah, I've got to play this. Managed to have a chat with Into Creates PR and get it off them to play. And we made Simon buy it to check it out.
So the cost of the game, if you weren't a Kickstarter backer and you didn't get this for free, it's $9.99 I think on all platforms. It's on Switch, DS, Steam, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. I think it's kind of available on everything. So $10 price point. Like I said, I got it for free. They've got the code for it, as did Simon. So just kind of that little bit of a caveat. I agree with you. Kind of what Simon's saying, like, it doesn't really improve much on the formula. What's new? I think there's quite a bit new here. I think that this is like the ultimate love letter to Castlevania fans, and especially Castlevania 3. It took me about an hour and a half to complete, so I played on easy. I'm at the stage of life where I just, for the most part, enjoy games, getting through them, having some fun. I want a little bit of a challenge, but I don't want to be snapping my controller in half. So there's some settings and things that you can kind of tweak to make the game a little bit easier. One of them being that, Simon touched on the fucking knockback. So I was able to turn that off, and thank God, because there's a stage later on where they're just air raiding you with fucking frogs, and that would be complete fucking madness. So let's talk about some of the options that you get.
Well, and on that point, so I played it on the sort of the more standard mode with all the knockback and everything, and it is a lot fairer. I mean, I've always struggled with like the very original NES Castlevania. I always get through up to death, like that boss, and can never get past that. But and I'm not great at Castlevania, but after I've played through them a number of times, I start to get a feel for the rhythm of each game. But it just seemed a lot fairer, because there's multiple characters you collect along the way, and you can switch to them on the fly, and they each have their own health, but they also have their own abilities. So there's certain parts and levels that, if you're restricted down to one character, it can be really tricky. But if you've got, say, the Alucard equivalent, who can turn into a bat and fly as one of his special abilities, you can sort of skip a tricky platforming section. And then there's some characters that I used to use almost like basically a sort of a tank, and send them in knowing I'm going to take a bit of damage, and just let them absorb the damage, and then switch over to then a character that I wanted to keep for a more specialised thing, or who's better at attacking. Sort of switch over to them and go through with them instead.
Yeah, so let's talk about the characters real quick. The main character is Zangetsu. He's a swordman guy. You have a sword. You also can get secondary weapons for all your characters. They're specific to each character. The second ally that you pick up is Miriam. She's sort of a high jumper. She has a slide move. She has a whip. You have Alfred, who's sort of your sluggish, dumpy wizard guy with some OP secondary weapons, and Gebel, who is a vampire that can turn into a bat. Sort of a balanced character outside of the bat move. And yeah, you're right. You can kind of juggle between the characters. They don't share the same health, so as one character is getting low, you can switch to another character and kind of extend your gameplay that way.
Well, we're on characters as well. Something that I think really sort of sets it apart for me when you first sort of look at it is the fact that the NES, sort of Simon sort of pointed out a bit that maybe it's not quite so faithful to sort of NES graphics, but even if like the backgrounds and things are a bit more detailed, they've almost basically used the same palette and the same detail levels for the four main characters that you would get in Castlevania 3, with the same sort of facsimile characters there. You've got Sifa, the wizard there, and obviously the Belmont, and it uses the same browns and oranges and things like that. I think that's just a really nice touch. Keeps it kind of faithful to that Castlevania 3.
I haven't played Castlevania 3 in a while, but it definitely feels like it. The color palette didn't really jump out to me so much as this is not traditional. This is too advanced graphic wise. I mean, some of the things they're doing with the bosses, obviously, they wouldn't have been able to do back then, but I felt that it still feels very retro. Some of these games that have come out with newer graphics that are retro style, you can just tell they're pushing the limits here, but I still feel like they stayed pretty faithful to the era, and the music as well. I think the music's fantastic. As you kind of work your way through the different levels, the music sort of builds. Definitely when you're getting to the stained glass part of the castle towards the end, the music's building and really makes you feel like you're reaching the end. What did you think about some of the music?
I can't remember which was I think it was like maybe stage 3 was probably one of my favourites. But yeah, I was really enjoyed the music from start to finish. I think it's definitely, if I had the soundtrack available, it would definitely be on a rotation. I'd have that playing in the background while I'm working and things now and again. I think they did do a really good job there as well, and that just sort of sums up the whole thing. As a package, it's for Simon mentioned it was a 6-month development time, and it was a separate team that worked on it, Inti Creates, rather than the main Bloodstained team. And it was done as a little bonus add-on for backers, but it's it's a really well implemented game in its own right. It's really impressive, what they've got done for presumably not a huge budget and quite a short turnaround time. And they've nailed the graphics. Like you say, the bosses, they're a bit more detailed than NES, and I feel that they reminded me a lot of playing many of the DS Castlevania games very fully, but seeing screenshots and things in magazines in the past, there's all that size and sort of colour detail level of the boss graphics in the DS games kind of reminds me a lot of them. And so and the bosses as well have been quite well thoughtfully designed. They're not. Some of the Castlevania bosses can kind of just end up being a bit spammy, and you end up, if you've got holy water, you're going to win because you can just throw holy water at them and then get in a few other shots. But otherwise, they're kind of really hard to deal with, and they don't feel like there's that much strategy behind them. Certainly, they never felt as good as like Mega Man bosses in the past. But these ones, they're bigger. They've got multiple behaviours, and they've got like windows where they're going to attack you and windows where you can attack them. And there's a bit of back and forth with them, and sort of risk and reward of getting in close and getting up to them and getting the hits in, but being able to give yourself enough time to sort of get out of dodge and get back as well.
Yeah, I found myself, especially with the dragon boss, using Alfred to shoot sort of a freeze beam or whatever that secondary weapon is at him, freeze the dragon head, and then quickly switching to Miriam with the big fucking axe and just whacking him in the head. So I found myself juggling between the two characters, multiple different powers and stuff. So there's a number of ways you can play it, and I love this game. I think for $10 it's a steal. After you play through the first playthrough, you can go through again. Not quite like Symphony of Night where the game really opens up, but there's a second playthrough where you can make a lot of different choices, whether you take characters or not, and then you can eventually fight Zangetsu is sort of the final boss if you play through it in a certain way.
They follows a bit of a pattern of Castlevania 3 with branching paths, but their feeling in Castlevania 3, they're more sort of, you've got a choice at the end of each stage with whether you want to go to one or the other, whereas this is kind of in the environment. You'll see the other paths, and a lot of the time it will depend on which characters you've got available and which abilities might gate whether you can go through stuff. So even on the first level, when you've only got one character available, there will be other paths that you can't do at that point. And it's not until you go back through in sort of a New Game Plus that you can then start to take these other earlier branching paths with some of the other characters. But then there's other ways you can replay the game again from a fresh save, and instead of collecting the extra characters, you can either absorb abilities from them or completely ignore them altogether and try and challenge yourself to go through the entire game just with Zangetsu and his original set of abilities, which must be pretty nails, because I'd say like the first playthrough is fairly easy, fairly fair with the variety of characters and abilities that you collect along the way. I think there's a medium tier which is, instead of collecting the characters, you can kill them and absorb their weapons, and Zangetsu then builds up a greater arsenal of special abilities for himself, which allows him to adapt later on. But then there's the real sort of purist mode of you're just kind of purely just a Simon Belmont. You've got one sort of attack and some sub weapons, and that you've got to try and get through to the end and really challenge yourself there. So there's plenty of the initial hour and a half to get through once may seem a bit disappointing, but there is things in there, more things to see, more things to replay, and because it is kind of compact and short, you never sort of get that feeling of like, oh Christ, I want to replay and see stuff, but I don't want to go through another 8 hours of game to see these other branches. Whereas you can sort of see everything in another sitting, or maybe 2 sittings if you sit there for sit down and play it one afternoon sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the levels are a nice variety. You sort of have your train level. The next is the water cave. The level after that is the sand level. Then you sort of go into a castle area. Then there's a secondary castle area that's more of a wooden tower where you fight this jet-powered electric guy. Then you move to the part of the castle where there's like buzzsaws, and you fight some umbrella boss lady that is like a tornado that comes out of a bathtub. And then the library. The library was my favorite as far as the music. I thought that was just incredible. Fight some kind of wall-jumping alien guy. Then you're, in sort of the final stage of the castle, which is like the stained glass window section is what I call it, where you fight the Dark Emperor. But it's good pacing, it moves along quickly, and like Dave said, it's not like you have to slog through 8 hours to get to the end again. It moves along pretty well, so I'd give it a recommendation, guys, for looking to pick something up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Castlevania, you want more Castlevania 3 or Action Castlevania, definitely pick it up. If you're someone that likes the gameplay of Castlevania and things like Ninja Gaiden, but you were never good enough to be able to see much more than the first 2 or 3 stages reliably. Certainly, I often fall into that category. It's a game where you can enjoy it and feel like you can complete it and get something from it, but then also, if you want to then challenge yourself further, it still offers you that ability as well. So, it doesn't do anything groundbreaking, but it does what it sets out to do really well.
This is one thing that I wanted to mention. Like, I feel like they fixed the jump as far as the mechanics. Like, I always felt Castlevania, the gravity was just a little bit heavy on the jump. And this feels like it's just like one spoonful different, where it's not quite as fast and heavy. This is definitely almost like a fan fiction. Like if you're a big fan of Harry Potter and after the books were done, you just had to read all the fan fiction because you needed to get more. This is definitely should go into your lineup of Metroidvania games. If you're a big fan, you should have this game in your collection for sure.
I think I've touched on all of my points. Again, this is a game I'll definitely be revisiting every now and again, every couple of months. Go through it, have a bit more of a playthrough of it. Keep it on my Switch at all times, I think.